Now, I recently did a first impressions video for Secret Worlds Legends, which is a revamped version of the Secret Worlds MMO that launched, I don't know, something like a decade ago. And ultimately, coming through this, I was not impressed with the gameplay. The combat in particular was extremely funky and clunky. The way the controls are set up and the way you have to manually just click, 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 click that left mouse button over and over and over. And if you watched my first impressions video, I said I was going to have a hard time pushing beyond to actually get into the gameplay for another, 10, 15, 20 hours to do a proper review. But I did push beyond. Thankfully, I was able to go ahead and play this game with a controller, or like a controller keyboard hybrid, because I'm playing it through Steam, which means you can automatically just use the controller setup through Steam, which worked fairly well for controlling the game, in which case it kind of acted sort of like an action combat sort of MMO. But at the end of the day, there were still a lot of issues that plagued it and me, specifically related to performance, even though the story is definitely something that I found interesting and intriguing on a storyline level. So we're going to be diving into my review today. Is it worth it in 2023? Again, like with most reviews, I think that these things are highly subjective, and my opinion might not be the opinion of everyone else out there, but hopefully you'll give this some consideration if you're thinking about maybe trying this game in 2023. It is free to play, and it's something where I think if you like kind of like that Stranger Things vibe of diving into a weird world that's got some kind of funky zombie type otherworld things coming over from another dimension into our world, you might actually enjoy this game a little bit. So let's go ahead and dive in. As always, if you like this review, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update, and consider supporting in all the ways that keep me on the air. You can do memberships here on the channel, Patreon page, super chat, super thanks, premieres, all that good stuff. We'll talk more at the end about all those ways. In the meantime, let's just get into this review. So going through the initial storyline that gets you into the world of the game past the introduction, I think one of the things that struck me as quite fun actually was the story. And you're given kind of this weird, like I said, Stranger Things kind of vibe where there's, creatures from the underworld or from the Underdark or from the otherworld coming over, and you have to fight them. And you ultimately, I don't think I've really found myself being challenged too much throughout gameplay, because of the fact that this is meant to be a single player experience these days. So they've kind of gotten rid of the multiplayer component, or at least the required multiplayer component. As I understand things, back in the day when this game launched, it was like a traditional MMORPG in the sense that you were meant to play this alongside other people, and they had the various factions, the dragons, the Templars, so on and so forth. But these days, it's just playing like any other single-player RPG. And there are multiplayer elements if you want to group up, but honestly, I never felt compelled to group up. I don't know that I would want to ever group up. I understand there are dungeons and multiplayer things that you could do later on in the game, but I would have to really get into this game to want to go beyond just playing it on my own. Now, I will say that in my first impressions video, I did say that I wasn't probably going to continue onwards, but I did go ahead and push, and I am ultimately happy that I did, because I did find the story quite good, and I also liked the sound design. Like, this is something where you get plenty of these little ethereal background things going on, whether it's monsters or people screaming, kind of guttural growls and moans and things that sort of add to the atmosphere of making you feel like you're in this creepy environment. And that's something I found played out throughout the early missions of the game, where you're running around in the forest and helping kill zombies and so on and so forth. It was really well done. And that was the other thing what kind of got me. I don't know if you guys watched Midnight Mass on Netflix, but when I got out of the original starter area, I don't know if this is the same for every starting faction. I went with the dragons, and they dump you out into this area of this forest where there's zombies and there's a town and there's this sheriff that you're helping and everything else. And the theory is that there was this boat that came in with a bunch of fog, and these creatures came with the fog and they started decimating all the people, which felt very Midnight Mass to me in the sense that they're all kind of stranded on an island, and and then there's all these zombies on the island that you can't get past. I don't know. It was a lot of fun for me, just sort of to get me into the world of there's something creepy going on. Now, beyond story, what about the gameplay? And this is where I find that, for the most part, this game isn't really different from any other game out there as far as the whole, oh, you have a character and that character can have gear and that character's gear can be customized, and there's active abilities and passive abilities and allocation of abilities, and you can upgrade all these different things through gameplay and through leveling. It is standard fare as far as all of that goes. But what drove me nuts, and still drives me nuts, even though I will say that with the controller it was a little bit easier to operate, I felt that for me the controller was a better way to play. The way the default controller setup is, where you are using a combination of like the mouse click, the Q button, the number 1 button, and the number 2 button, and then like the right mouse click. That is so confusing, and it's one of the most horrific, literally one of the most horrific control schemes I have ever played through in an MMORPG, or any game for that matter. And I'm so glad that because it was through Steam, I was able to go ahead and just play it on my controller and have everything, sort of play like a much more traditional action RPG, with right trigger being my main ability and being able to do left trigger, and also the actual buttons to be able to do different abilities. So that made the combat a little more enjoyable for me. As far as the rest of it, I think the combination of sort of like your primary gameplay, but then needing to hit the Alt tab, or hit the Alt button, I should say, to bring up the context menu, or to be able to move your mouse around in free mode to be able to open up all the menus. I found that to be very clunky. I wish there was just a way to quickly open up, a menu, as opposed to needing to hit the Alt button to bring up the mouse thing and then move the mouse around to click on all these things. There is definitely some weirdness going on with the control schemes, and I don't know who to blame for this, because the UI and everything else, it's not that bad, the UI, but the way they want you to interact with the game through the controls and the free mouse click mode versus the game mode, that's very confusing to me, and I wonder how much of that contributed to this game not being a very good experience for most people. What's interesting to me is that when I did the first impressions video, I got a lot of comments from people saying this is one of the worst MMOs they ever played. I don't know if it's the worst I've ever played. Again, once I pushed beyond and gave it a fair shot and actually sunk my teeth into it, I found, again, the story was enough to keep me playing for several hours. Now, was it enough to keep me playing beyond several hours? Not enough, ultimately. I need something. I need a game that is, cohesive on all fronts. And this game, for me, wasn't cohesive on all fronts. There's just too much going on with the way the game plays that I didn't like, but that doesn't mean other people aren't going to like it. I can say that for me, if I had to pick a game to play, this would not be a game that I would choose to play on a regular basis. It's something that I wouldn't mind diving into from time to time. I'm actually sitting here as I'm recording this, and when I was sitting down to record this earlier today, debating, do I keep this on my hard drive or not? Because I did actually find myself getting engaged enough with the storyline in the village beyond the initial starter area, to say, hey, I kind of want to keep helping these villagers and find out what happened, what's up with the fog and the creepiness, and is there going to be a resolution to this, or are they going to spin this out into 30 or 40 hours of gameplay? I don't know that question. I don't know the answer to that question, and that's something that intrigues me. But there is ultimately another thing that took me out of the game and made me just not really be able to get any enjoyment out of it at all, and that is the performance issues. Because while the game plays fairly well in the sort of single player areas where it's just you, and I'm on ultra mode, I'm on an older laptop with a 1080, so it's not like I'm on a horribly low end system, although it is getting kind of dated these days. And when I'm playing through the single player stuff, The performance was pretty good. It was, I never noticed a dip. I don't have a frame rate meter going on, but I would say that it's 60 FPS pretty easily. But the moment I got into any areas where there was multiplayer components, where there were other people on screen, it just became a lag fest. It was horribly choppy, and I don't know what's going on. I tried to configure all sorts of different settings, but even on the lowest settings of the game, this thing ran like a piece of dog shit when I got into any sort of group environments. Specifically, more importantly, the very first group in the area they put you in was just like this teleportation hub in this otherworldly tree of life thing where you've got like these portals that you can go to other places, and that's how you get around and do the story missions and stuff. When you're in that initial tree area and you're using like the little teleportation pads to jump around between the various platforms, it was so laggy that it was unplayable, literally unplayable. And no matter what I did on my end, I could not get it to be less of a lag fest. Like I said, I tweaked everything down to the absolute minimum settings, and it was still a lag fest. And I'm not talking like single digit frames. I'm talking single digit frames plus huge chunks of like the game just freezes for 5 to 10 seconds. But you can see when I'm playing it in like the single player mode, it looks great. It runs like every other game I've ever played, and it had really, I felt, fairly decent graphics for a 10-year-old plus game, So at the end of the day, there are a variety of factors that are contributing to this game not being something I can really recommend unless you just really, 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 really love the story. And again, subjective viewpoint, I am not everybody out there. I'm sure there are still people who play this game and find it to be incredibly enjoyable. I did not. I did find the storyline intriguing. I am kind of debating whether or not I might even want to keep it on my PC just to sort of get a resolution to that initial storyline to find out what's up with the fog and everything else. But it's really hard for me to want to log in on a regular basis given all the performance issues and the issues with just controlling the game. So at the end of the day, is Secret Worlds Legends worth playing? I personally can't recommend this to other people just because of my personal experience. But, take my review with a grain of salt. It might be something that you want to try because it is free to play, and there's nothing wrong with trying a game when it's free because ultimately there's no risk. So you can just install it, give it 5-10 hours, and see if it's something for you or not. Anyway, if you got to the end of this and you found my review helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. And as always, if you can support, that's how I get to do this full time. So drop a membership here on YouTube, drop a membership over on our Patreon page. You can do super thanks and super stickers and all those other things, whether it's a live stream or a premiere. All are great ways to support. You can program in your own amount, $5, $25, $50, whatever, or you can use YouTube's pre-programmed amounts. Stay safe out there, everybody, and until next time, happy gaming.
If I was a gambling man, I'd put money on that someone.